Hi, everybody. This is Marguerite Rigoglioso, founding director of Seven Sisters Mystery School, and this is the free online call, Are Gods Real? Communicating Through the Veil. So you've come to the right place. I'm delighted to be here and have you all here. We have more than 200 people registered for the call from all over the world, and I know that that number is going to be increasing as people continue to register throughout the week and listen back. So welcome one and all, whether you're listening live or you're listening to the recording later. I'm going to move quickly to the heart of the talk, but first a few things. The slides which accompany this call are accessible on the web link that you were given via email. So if you are on the live call listening by phone and not looking at the slides, you may want to find that email and click on that link. It's not essential for the talk, but they can be helpful. And of course, you can always go back to the web link, listen back, and you will see the slides right there if you want to take notes. For those listening live, if you are looking at the slides, go under the slide screen and make sure you click Sync Up with Phone or Sync Up with Web, depending on the mode you're listening on, so that the slides are advancing at the same time as you're hearing me. Because for those on the web, there's a 17-second time lag from when I speak to when you hear me. But otherwise, I'll be advancing them, so you don't need to do anything else, and I already have the first one up. And just a note to those listening by phone, you will not want to have the audio function turned on the website, otherwise you're going to get feedback. So pick one or the other for your audio, either phone or web. Of course, those listening to the recording later, you don't have to worry about any of this, as the slides and the audio will be right there for you. For those listening live only via the web, you will only be able to communicate questions or comments online and not via audio. The space for that is on the screen under the slides. And excuse me, basically you can start those rolling in any time, and there will hopefully be time later for me to address some of your sharings and some of your questions. So unless I open up the phone lines, you will be able to hear me, but I won't be able to hear you, nor will the other callers, so you can make as many noises as you want. And I'm just now inviting you to please be sure that you're listening in a quiet place, and I ask that you refrain from multitasking. You're going to get the maximum benefit out of this talk on multiple levels if you simply sit, watch, and listen. And so that means no emailing, no texting, no fielding telephone calls or questions while you're listening. Just let this be a time for you. Okay, a couple of announcements before we begin. Just a little bit about Seven Sisters Mystery School to those of you who are new to us. I do recommend that after the call you visit our website, which is sevensistersmysteryschool.com. There in the slide, the 7 is written out. And you will see on the landing page there that there are some free audios that might be relevant to you. And once you select those, you will go into the website proper, or you can say no thanks and just enter into the home page. And you will see there are many other free audios, free articles, and interviews with me that are available on the free resources tab, as well as recorded webinars for men and women, that some of which are free, some of which are not, that have been made available over the past 2 years at Seven Sisters Mystery School, my blog, what my programs are, the mentoring that I do, upcoming webinars and classes, and so forth. And the most pertinent upcoming event is the new webinar I'll be doing in August, running August and September, Gods We Trust, Dionysus, Asclepius, Jesus, and the Gifts They Bring. So I will be talking more about that later in the call, but I just wanted to draw your attention to that. Okay, so here we are today talking about, are gods real? Why are we here? Well, we've all heard about divinities and religious stories and myths, but how do we know if we're there? And Is a belief in goddesses and gods a matter of sheer faith or folly, or is it something that we've made up to sort of quell our existential angst of existence? What about if we embrace a traditional religion, say Christianity, Judaism, and so forth, a monotheistic religion, let's say, but we also feel drawn by the thought of other deities? How do we reconcile those? And how can we experience more support for such alternative spiritual views? And how can we cultivate a body of knowing and a community around this? These are some really pertinent questions that we all have and that I think have brought us together today. So we're looking at the question first of evidence of gods and goddesses, a very scientific type of question. Because really, what is evidence? And, you know, many people consider evidence to be something having to do with nature or outer space or quantum physics, that there will be something in quantum physics that can finally prove the existence of gods, or nature itself is proof enough that the divine exists, or the universe itself is proof enough that the divine exists. And so it's really a matter of how you hold it and where you're coming from. When we do get to the area of quantum physics where things get really spooky, quanta being the smallest particles that we know of, the smallest particles of matter, as well as the smallest divisions of time, these things, matter and time, start acting paradoxically. They flip, they come in and out of existence a million times a second, they are aware that they're being observed, and that type of thing. We have also spooky phenomena like black holes and so forth. And then this issue that quantum scientists are talking about called dark matter, that is what they believe undergirds all of existence, a kind of a dark matter, which brings us to the age-old concept of the dark mother as being the ground of all existence. So it may be that quantum physics and religion are ultimately going to be very, very compatible. But what I'd like us to do right now, by way of getting into this topic and really getting into more of the required open state of consciousness in order to perceive, we're just going to do a journey together. And so I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in and exhale. And take another breath in and exhale. And take another breath in and exhale. And as you go inward, become aware of every place where you're sitting, where your seat or your feet are touching the floor or the chair, where you are connected to Mother Earth. Allow your spine to straighten just a little, your shoulders to drop, softening the muscles around your eyes, releasing your belly as you continue to gently breathe in and out, relaxing your entire abdomen, your genital organs, and unfurling your feet. And feel yourself come fully inside your skin. And become aware of your abdomen now and your womb or womb space or your phallus or whatever your sexual organs are. And if there has been surgery, everything is still intact. And just give that a blessing right now. That is one of the ways you connect with the divine, through that portal. We know that we can connect with the divine through all of the chakras, all of the 7 chakras up and down your central meridian, and many of the others throughout your body. And become aware now of the center of Mother Earth, that scientists tell us may well be a very, very large molten iron crystal, many miles high and wide. And get a sense of your own abdomen becoming like a tree trunk that's thick, the circumference of your abdomen, and it's flexible. It can go all the way down to the center of the earth, and we're going to ask Mother Earth permission to do the grounding. And now just send that grounding trunk from your abdomen all the way through your building, the many layers of the earth, all the way to the center, and see the end wrap around that molten iron crystal 3 times. And feel the surge of energy coming up your grounding trunk, up, entering and blessing your root chakra, and blessing each chakra as it flows up the central channel of your body, cascading out the crown of your head, bringing all within and around you a beautiful sphere of crystalline gold light at least 3 feet out in every direction, that's cascading down now all the way around your body and below your feet at least 3 feet. Feeling rooted to Mother Earth and connected to her energy field. Now becoming aware of the entire cosmos and the central sun out in the cosmos, a star that we're calling the central sun. And you're calling a stream of golden light energy down from the central sun to enter and bless the crown of your head and bless each chakra as it continues to flow down the central channel of your body into your abdomen. Now, become aware of this sphere of golden light that's within and outside of you, and become aware of yourself at the subatomic level. Become aware of yourself at the level of your material that is smaller than the atoms, the quarks and the bosons and the very tiniest particles of you. And notice now how those particles are identical with the particles in your chair, in your floor, in your walls, in the air around you, the plants, the other beings, the material of Mother Earth, the rocks, the waters, and the entire universe, the stars, the tremendous energies of heat and light. Feel how your subatomic particles are part of this great web, and how they actually came from the larger cosmos, from the stardust. As you do this, understand that you are part of the unified field. And click in and feel that unified field as being the expression of the supreme divine. And feel how all of that matter is connected through the energy of the love vibration. Taking a deep breath in. Exhaling. Feeling yourself fully in your chair and your seat in this present moment. Softly opening your eyes. And coming back to present attention. So you have just had something of the experience of the unified field, the unity consciousness, and that is something that you can put your awareness on and join at any time. And it's a very good exercise to remind you of the connectivity that is the divine. I will share a little bit about my own story with the divine, with the divinities. When I was 10 years old, my mother died, as some of you know. And that, unbeknownst to me, was a great initiation, a great descent journey. And really what it turns out is that it was an initiation into the knowledge of Demeter, the goddess of the grain, or Demeter, and Persephone, the daughter of underworld and springtime, and the separation of the mother and the daughter. Years later, when I was 31, I was poised to go on a pilgrimage of ancient goddess sites in Crete, and the trip was going to conclude in Athens. And a week or so before going on the trip, I happened to stumble upon a book called Motherless Daughters, The Legacy of Loss by Hope Edelman. And I started reading that book. I almost gulped the whole thing down in one night, and I was just shaking because nobody had ever explained the phenomenology of the girl who loses the mother and what happens to her psyche. And she mentioned the story of Demeter and Persephone as being the only story in the West that really portrayed the mother-daughter in a positive way, in which they support one another, root for one another, attempt to protect one another, and that their great mysteries were held at Eleusis in Greece, and that was about 15 miles outside of Athens. And the top of my head almost blew off, and I knew that I was to go to Eleusis after this trip concluded in Athens. And I did go there after the trip, and I had a mystical experience there. It's not something I could explain in any way that would not diminish it. If I told you the little steps of why this was so momentous to me, it might not seem great to you, but it was such a synchronistic series of events that it made me understand that I was a part of my mother, which is part of the Eleusinian mystery concept, that the mother replicates herself in the daughter, and there is a deep and great mystery in that linked me up with these great goddesses and these great beings. And because of the nature and the sequence of events, I had that mystical, chilling experience where I understood that I was part of something larger, that my suffering had not been in vain, that these goddesses had been calling me all along and were just waiting for me to awaken. And from there, those were the two goddesses that I began to communicate with and serve. And since then, there has been much road passed, and I find that I have come to embrace or be called by numerous other goddesses and gods, and sometimes my connection with them ebbs and flows according to my time of life. So right now it's not so much Persephone who are calling me, but more other deities, and especially masculine deities, and the Magdalene and the Blessed Mother Mary, and I may have a little more time to talk about that later. But that's just a little bit about my awakening. And then it remained a path that was largely communicating with me through synchronicities and so forth. But when I came to California and I started meeting people who introduced me to sacred plant medicine, and I had those types of journeys, then I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt of the reality of the other world and the fact that it was teeming with life and divine intelligences, and that a communication channel or channels could be really clearly and carefully developed. And so that is what gave me a large part of my confidence in knowing about the other world. It was being able to open and see, and those plants facilitated that opening and that seeing. So I mentioned in the emails that you were getting about what we would talk about today, one thing we would touch on is the concept of monotheism versus polytheism, right? The one versus the many. Is there one supreme divine or many? We know that in our, first of all, as spiritual people, we're dealing with a number of issues that obscure the ability to see the other world. One is a very strong scientism or scientific materialism that basically says that the only thing that exists is what we can see or detect with our five senses. And anything beyond that is not real. That is a program for putting the veil over lots of people's eyes, and it has worked quite well. On the other hand, then we have other programs that talk about whether there's only one God or not, and what you are allowed to access or venerate or worship or even think of as real. And many of us have grown up with those kinds of traditions that cause a lot of issues. And it's another layer of programming about what we're allowed to see and therefore what we're seeing unless we have these types of openings and awakenings. So in my experience working with deity consciousness, I have come to the conclusion that you really need to hold paradox, which means almost two seemingly opposite things at the same time. And the one here that I'm talking about is the paradox that there is both one and many gods at the same time. Because what you will find is that if you start down the road of only one supreme divinity, you will eventually find that it's going to divide up into other divine intelligence. For example, we have this even within Christianity. They try to get the idea of a monotheistic God, and yet what ends up happening? They have to accommodate the reality of multiple deities, and they do it in the concept of the Holy Trinity, in the concept of the saints, and so forth. Similarly, polytheistic religions, let's say in various Hindu traditions and so forth, the multiplicity of gods ends up resolving into a one as well if you take the concept to its farthest logical conclusion, right? And then the one splits back into the many, and the many splits back into the one. So it's this kind of iterative figure eight between the one and the many. So my following has been to really be flexible around this and not to try to pin it down. Because anytime you do start pinning things down as doctrine or dogma, you get into trouble. Number one, you close off the opportunity and the door to creativity, which is essential in these divinity relationships, which is why it's such an exciting time right now, the fact that we are in the West and other places discovering polytheism again, and all the temples have been leveled, and all the priests and priestesshoods have been disappeared. We can start fresh, and that's kind of exciting because it keeps it supple, it keeps it alive. Once we start getting into rules and regulations and codification, and it's this but it's not that, then it stops the motion, and eventually you'll get into the shadow material coming up, where for example, so the Catholic Church is so insistent on this God of, some kind of purity or whatever, that then evil will come right around the corner and sort of bite it in the butt. And so you have the shadow element operating all over certain traditional religions, right? We've seen this. We've seen this, that if you don't give the equal and opposite its due as a divine force, it will let you know of its presence. And incidentally, starting today, before this webinar, a lot of trickster activity. The teleseminar service we were using suddenly went haywire with something. I couldn't find my headset. It was just like crazy. And I thought, okay, what's going on? Who's talking to me? And they're like, yeah, you better tell them about the trickster. So I'm like, okay, I'm telling you people about the trickster, which most of you people know about anyway, but we're just giving a little nod to the trickster and these other energies that show up at times like this. I'm always a little afraid whenever I do a webinar or a class on a divine mystical topic, who knows what's going to happen. Okay? So one versus many. Then we get into the question of female versus male. Or is it a hermaphroditic universe, or God, or divine, or is it a sexually copulating universe if we're trying to think of the overarching energy? So there are different thought forms and different traditions with all of this, and a lot of folks, of course, these days in the West are exploring the feminine, female side of the divine, because for so long we've had only the male presented to us, and in a kind of a distorted way. But, again, can we hold only one or the other? Is the universe, is the divine predominantly female or predominantly male or predominantly half and half or something else, something transgender? So there's no real strong, solid answer. And I think that if we think that we're going to have a solid answer, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of trouble and calcification. And then the other question is, so are there different statuses of the divine then? Are there higher and lower divinities? Are there rungs or hierarchies of the deities? And we could say yes or no. And there are many kinds of teachings in various traditions that talk to us about hierarchies and rungs of reality, and, that the Olympian gods are in a lower rung of reality than the other type of whatnot, I'm just putting these questions out there because some of you may have already been grappling with these questions. For some of you, these may be interesting philosophical questions for you to ponder in your meditation, in your guided journeys, in your experiences, and ask for information yourself. Come to an understanding of what you are to learn in this lifetime and how is that to be changing. Let these realms speak to you directly and show you the puzzle you're supposed to be focusing on now. So again, the question of, where are these deities? Where do they dwell? What level of reality? Well, we have all these traditions that talk about a realm in which they reside, called either heaven, or in the ancient Greek pantheon, Olympus, in the Celtic pantheon, Avalon, the Nordic Asgard, the Tibetan Shambhala, and so forth. These are all names to talk about abodes of the divine. And what I came to understand, and oftentimes they are connected with places on planet Earth, which means that those places are considered portals by which you can gain stronger or quicker access to these deities should you decide to go there, make a pilgrimage, what have you. But in your meditation, you can contact Olympus. In your meditation, you can contact Avalon, even without physically traveling to these places. Of course, there are reasons and purposes why you might want to travel, say, to Glastonbury, which is by some considered the seat of Avalon, and to Mount Olympus, which is a six-pointed mountain in Greece. But I think a very useful meditation is to go in and ask for entry to Olympus, for example, and see what happens. Deities are also known to dwell in the astral body and the astral bodies and planets. So stars. Why are the planets named after deities because there is some ancient esoteric, it wasn't just some guy at NASA making it up. There is some ancient esoteric, and even those guys at NASA, a lot of times either they're picking up on stuff or there's an esoteric stream that they know about that we haven't even been informed that they know about, that they're picking up on. But the connection with deities and stars and deities with planets is a profound one that also speaks about the interlocking of the material world and the mystical world and the heavenly world and the earth realm and how all of that dances together. And these planets and astral bodies are considered abodes of deities as well. So what does that tell us? And I've spoken many times about Gaia as being an abode of a deity known as Gaia, Mother Earth. Gaia. She is a consciousness. In the ancient Greek time, they worshipped her. Down in South America, they call her Pachamama and so forth. So here she is right here, embodied in this great big blue planet. Then we have another realm, the middle realm of the Fae or fairies. Again, where this is not exactly clear, but it's a little closer to the earth plane in and around plants and things like that. We also have things like the nymphs in the Greek tradition that are around all the waterways and trees. So here in earth forms, the deities are said to reside, and they can also be placed in statues, temples, hearths, and altars. So that there was a great mystical tradition to animate statues and to make altars and temples live by installing the deity through ritual into an object, a central object, either a statue or a beetle or something there. You can try this at home if you want. Then we have the realm of the underworld with the dark lords and ladies. Ever been there? You have, whether you've known it or not. If you've ever been sad or depressed, if you've ever had any kind of loss or tragedy, you've been taken down. And so working with these kinds of forces and understanding them is perhaps one of the greatest mysteries of all. And some would say, and in my experience, the underworld is the first portal to the other world. And you first have to be initiated there before you go anywhere. Some believe that deities exist in or are animals, such as cows, and even in humans, that we ourselves are divine, or that we can bring in avatars, holy beings, replicas of the divine into women's bodies that are birthed and walk the planet to help or harm the planet according to their energy, and that's part of my work on divine birth, as some of you know. Some believe divinities are in DNA, or that is an essence of divine strain. Of course, matter, light, and in thoughts, in or as emotions. The Gnostic Gospels are filled with an understanding that archetypal forces such as anger, depression, fear, joy, peace are actual deities that are personified on the astral plane. They can and need to be addressed and propitiated, or they will have their way with you. What they want, like any god, is attention and food and energy. And they really like the energy of humans. So if you want to be working with depression and come to a kind of a peace with it, you might want to make an altar that honors depression, and you might want to put it in a secret place and then see what happens. And of course, there's the concept of deities being anywhere and everywhere. How are deities born? In many of the traditions, we have stories of the self-generation of the God from itself, of the universe from itself. And that's such a deep concept that you could probably go insane thinking about it. So I'm not responsible for anyone's breakdown after this call, just warning you. But that's what's called autogenesis. She was born out of herself, is what they say around the ancient Egyptian and pre-Egyptian goddess Neith, for example. Then we also have the doubling of gods or the parthenogenetic birth of one god from another. So there are hints that, for example, Persephone is the parthenogenetic double of her mother, so that gods can give birth, particularly goddesses can give birth, and that male gods can create other kinds of beings through a different kind of phenomenon, more like a creation of not a birthing. And then, of course, and this is where it gets really interesting, the idea that gods or divine essences or divine intelligences can be created by human thoughts, human practices, human rituals, and human artistic creations. So, for example, one thing I saw in one of my journeys was that in the film Avatar, how they create that other world with that female character who's very noble and so forth. They're like, well, now they've created her. They have created that being. Operates in the inner planes. And, the question could be brought up, well, did she exist beforehand and they brought her in? Or did they actually create her through her imagination? And I think it could be either or both. And this is where artistic activity really comes in. How we are told that humans are divine through what we can create. And therefore we want to be careful with what we create. Because you see a lot of art that's being created today with imagery and media and so forth that is spewing out some pretty gnarly stuff. All of that now has life on the astral plane. It's operating in our inner landscape. It operates on your inner landscape if you see it, so you need to put up screens if you don't want it to come into your inner landscape. And beware that when you're in movies and film, wow, that stuff's coming right into you. All those guppies that they've birthed that are all about violence and evil and different beings and entities and characters and so forth, ooh, there it all is. So what is it that you want to create? At PantheaCon this year, there was this one fellow who was talking about the creation of these monstrous forms in laboratory, the chimerae, where they're like crossing pigs and ants and, just crazy genetic stuff that they're doing, that the genetics, when we tamper on the earth level, they have a reality on the astral plane. Whatever that being is gets created in the laboratory, and then it has a life of its own on the astral plane. And it wants, guess what? Food. So this is why we have to be responsible for what we're creating in science, in the arts, and down to our thought forms, right? And our rituals. What is it that you're conjuring in your sexual fantasies? That's another place. So think about that. What is it that you want to be bringing into your field and spawning out into the other field? All very deep, deep questions. So, signs you may be called by a deity. Now, I know a lot of you are on this phone line because you're more than curious. You've already had some experiences in this regard. And what you're really looking for is validation, community, some other ideas to help you strengthen what you already know, to help you go further. And so this is the beauty of having discussions like this and creating community. And I do encourage anybody who wants to write in on the Facebook page that we created for this event, Our God's Real. Post your ideas, your thoughts. Allow yourselves to be in community with one another, because we need to re-strengthen the grid and the field of the reality of deities so that more people can access it more easily without having to throw off these heavy, thick veils in order to get there. So the more of us do this work, the more we strengthen that field, and it's easier for people to say, oh, yeah, I know, that deity exists. Okay, so now what? Now what do I do with that? Rather than spending 50 years getting to the opening, right? Because we all have work to do. There's a lot of service, and this is all part of service. So signs you may be called. It's common to be recruited by more than one, believe me. I'm sure a lot of you are laughing. Once you start in and you say yes to one, the other ones start calling in. It's like, suddenly they've gotten your email address or they've gotten your phone number and you're getting telecalls or whatever, telemarketing calls. So once they see receptivity, you'll be called by a number. I don't really know of anybody who's only devoted to one divine intelligence these days, but it could be certainly, and great, fine, if that's your path, wonderful. But they're so needing of human beings that they're doubling and tripling and quadrupling and more, quintupling up. I can't even begin to show you what's on my altar. So how do you know which is your deity or deities? Well, you generally will start having a deep feeling about or attraction to a deity, and this may be something karmic. Usually it is. You've danced with this deity before in numerous other lives, either positive or negative, and you have some work still to do or to clean up. But go with that attraction. Start looking up the deity online, in books, going to events that have to do with this deity and so forth. You may be attracted to a spiritual tradition, Tibetan Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever. And so follow that. Go with it. See where that's leading you. And then which deities are calling you within that. Several will pop up to you. You may have an inner call to travel to a place. Greece, ancient, sites of ancient Greece, Avalon, Mount Kailash, wherever, anywhere around the world. See about going there. What's the religious tradition there? Or who are the indigenous people? There might be something that's beckoning you. Again, of course, synchronicities. Pay attention to synchronicities. They are God's communication mechanism. Dreams, of course. Sometimes you'll get direct communications. Messages in meditation and trance journeys. And then also some of you who go for sessions with clairvoyants or diviners, there might be revelations in divinations about, who is your deity, who is your deity or deities, and you can get information that way. So then we're looking at how to develop a relationship with a deity. Well, the very simplest way is to create an altar that is dedicated in part or entirely to a deity. And as many of you already know, you simply place an image or images of the deity or deities there. Statues are best, but you can also do flat images and so forth. And create elements around them such as earth, air, fire, water, so candles and so forth. And then this is the step that a lot of people don't know about that I've learned about throughout the years, is that you make weekly offerings to them and refresh those offerings. Food, flowers, incense, plants, leaves, and so forth. But you want to keep it current, okay? Grains, all that type of thing. Milk, honey, water, wine. Something that tells you that you are using some of your resources to gather a substance that on the astral plane is a food for this deity, partly through the etheric vibration of what you're offering and partly simply through your intention. It's almost your intention that's as much of the food for the divine one as the actual substance. And so, as we know, ancient temples and even many modern ones and shrines and so forth are all fed and cleaned and so forth periodically, so that when the energy goes out of the food or whatever, you have another offering that is refreshing everything. And that means it's refreshing your relationship. Then, in front of the altar preferably, but anywhere really, out in nature, what have you, meditating on or praying to the deity and asking it for information about who he or she is, as well as guidance for your life and requests for your life. And you may want to make vows such as, now be careful about vows. be careful about vows, because if you make a vow, you should follow through with it. So you see, like a lot of in Latin America, Blessed Mother Mary, if you save my child from this disease, I will walk on my knees for 3 miles to your shrine. And they do it, okay? Or, right? So those are types of vows. But figure out what is an appropriate vow for you to make, and it could be more helpful if it's a vow of service to someone or something on the planet. And just even offering service on behalf of this divinity is a great way to start and cultivate a relationship with this divine one. Again, another way to develop a relationship with a deity is to enter into altered states or open states of consciousness through vision questing, for example, journeying with sacred medicines, dance, fasting, listening to altering music, and so forth. Now, I will put the disclaimer here. I am not advocating the use of illegal drugs. If you decide to do that, that is completely your own responsibility, but it is not something that I am publicly advocating. So hear this and use your discernment. And those who decide to go on any particular road, it's advisable that you work with teachers, that you are careful about your setting, that you are careful about your intentions and your whole setup, working up to it, and so forth. Another way to cultivate the relationship is to express gratitude when your prayers are answered, like really to acknowledge, hey, there has been some reciprocity going on here. I see that the time-space continuum has been altered through this, and I thank you. And then to be in regular contact, so not to let this contact languish. The stronger your connection, the more frequent your communication, the more you're going to see results in your life. Okay, so as a means of connecting with male gods, I'm just going to take a pause here to talk about one resource that might get some of you onto this path a little bit more strongly, and that is, as I mentioned, the webinar that I have coming up called Gods We Trust. And this is focusing on Dionysus, Asclepius, Jesus, and the gifts they bring. So this has to do with, as I mentioned earlier, part of my own journey, moving from a good Catholic girl from the Bronx to becoming somewhat agnostic or just neutral about the whole thing, to having an awakening to the sacred feminine, an awakening to polytheism, and then finally, eventually moving through and understanding that there needs to be peace and reconciliation among men and women, and therefore there needs to be peace and reconciliation among women and men and male gods and female gods. So this is part of my work where I am understanding that there is value in connecting with the energies of gods who have been particularly benevolent throughout time, and these are some of the ones that I'm focusing on in this webinar. It starts August 6th, runs September 17th, like today. It's going to be 12 to, actually, those calls may go to 1:30, like we will go to today, Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK. There won't be a call on August 20th. And once again, accessible via phone or web, and you can listen later and view the slides. And that will continue to be available even after it's concluded, so you can always go back and look at it. It's for you if you're looking for healthy models of positive male energy and you're seeking healing from and with the masculine. This is really up for a lot of people, not just women, men as well, and transgendered folks as well. It's good if you also want some balance with goddess veneration. A lot of us have been in the goddess movement for a long time, and we're like, hey, something else is calling to be addressed. And if you're ready to open to the benevolent face of the masculine godhead, which is, again, really important for us to do that as a part of this peace work among the genders on the planet. Know that as you're doing this webinar, you are contributing to the harmonious, the healing and the harmonious relations between men and women. The 6 sessions are Dionysus, God's gift to women, because he was. All of his attributes indicate that he was the one who would fix broken hearts, and he was the one who would allow women to have sexual relating when they might have been rejected by human men. And he was the one to allow women to release the strictures of their time. So he is something worth looking into. And we're going to learn about him historically. Then we're going to have a guided journey on the second day. Then we don't have class. Then we're coming back and we're going to talk about Asclepius, whom I call God's gift to humanity. This great living avatar who was divinely born, who then went through his initiation rites and went into a divine death and operated and still operates on the astral plane as a great god of healing. What could be more wanted than that these days on every level? We need these gods, okay? So who was he? And not only that, but his wife and his daughters and his sons. A whole healing family that was operating and would be worshipped and venerated and attended and visited by ancient Greeks in the Asclepians, these temples. So we're going to be looking at him and his family historically, and then we're going to be doing a healing journey in the Asclepion together. Then we'll be looking at Jesus, or Yeshua, whom I call God's gift to the cosmos. A great, great, massive, massive male energy who, according to many belief systems, was able to funnel in through the human plane, through the womb of a very sacred holy woman herself, who was in a lineage of women who knew how to do this. And he came onto the planet, as all of these gods did, to help humanity advance, raise their consciousness, lift the veils at a time when things were going particularly badly, right about around 0 AD, according to the records. And you know, frankly, the fact is, whether you believe this being walked on the earth or not, this being exists. This being exists because we say it does. Therefore, it does. Therefore, you can access it, okay? How's that for paradoxical creativity? How's that for getting you into an altered state of consciousness and understanding the multiple levels of reality and our role in them? So we're going to be dealing with Jesus as, yes, a reality in a non-dogmatic way, in a Gnostic way, in the way of this Christed Son, this Christed energy that is accessible to men and women as something that can help us elevate, that can penetrate into our hearts and open our hearts, which is what is needed. And so on the last day, we will be looking at and having an experience of becoming the Christ self. So the webinar, again, is going to have some historical detail on the qualities and attributes of these gods, very important for us to know, because the right brain and the left brain work in tandem together when we are working with deities. That's why all the mystery traditions had teachings that were didactic as well as experiential, because getting the facts and the details weaves and shifts into the left brain or the right brain so that then you can have a living experience. And then aspects of the living experience that you might not have seen in writing will filter back into your left brain, and then you will start finding, actually, that was written about that deity. Okay? So you're going to be going again in that figure 8 between the two brain hemispheres. So we're going to be going through guided meditations that you can then reuse to connect with these male divinities again and again. So that's a wonderful thing. There's going to be coded information in this material to help you further awaken, like there's coded information in everything I'm saying today. Those of you who are starting to go in and access, you can start feeling yourself going a little bit tilt. That's a good sign. That means your upper chakras are opening or your consciousness is opening. And there's going to be a lot of that happening in this webinar. You're going to come away with a better connection with and appreciation for the sacred masculine, which is going to have a positive influence in your relations with men, whatever your sex. We all need healing around this, okay? We've all had the abandoning or the violating father, right? So in whatever way, whether it's personally or in culture writ large, and this is what we are healing. It is time now. And you will have improved balance and integration of masculine and feminine within yourself. Maybe you will even experience that divine alchemical marriage that is so elusive and sought after, and it's really the elixir of life. You'll also have an international support network of like-minded people. And for those who opt for the slightly higher payment level, you get a 45-minute mentoring session with me, and most people find those to be incredibly helpful, either for integrating the material or just deepening, moving ahead in their spiritual life, releasing some kind of trauma, dealing with some kind of karma, experiencing a healing, getting validation for your knowing, having a sense of better direction for your career or your sacred career, what have you. People use that mentoring session in many different ways. And then there's a private Facebook page for discussion that can be really helpful. So just last thing I'll say on this, the cost. With the 45-minute mentoring call, you can do 4 monthly payments of $97, or if you want to pay slightly less, pay it up front for $377. Without the mentoring, you can do it for 4 monthly payments of $87. We'll pay in full for $337. And if you do the monthly options, basically you just go in, register, and pay for the monthly option, and then your card will be charged monthly. You need a credit card to do it, and we take care of all of that charging, so you don't have to worry about it again. Now, for those of you listening live on the call, there's a $40 discount. When you go into the shopping cart and they say, coupon code, there's a coupon code box, you put God's 40, and whether you're paying for either the monthly or the pay in full, it's going to deduct $40 off of your payment, and that's a pretty good deal. Because my mentoring sessions alone are at $189, and so you're getting, you're getting a lot more value here. This discount is good today only until 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. UK. All right, so you will want to register on the link below the screen on the web where you're looking at the slides. There's a link right there, and you can do that before 2 p.m. today Pacific. So you don't need to do it now, but you can just go back to it and do it. I'll remind you. Okay, so let's just all take a deep breath and exhale. I'm just going to do a little check-in around the, just giving you a moment to absorb some of that material because it's a lot that gets thrown at you. And, okay, great. So, moving now to why would you go through all that? Why would you go through the webinar? Why would you go through the working with your altar and communicating with these gods? Well, a lot of you already know, but I will just remind you. Obviously, you get a greater sense of connection with the cosmos. You get connection with the mystery of existence. What more could you want? When people start accessing that level of ecstasy, as the ancient Greeks called it, you become extraordinarily fulfilled. You have a sense that you're not alone and that your life has meaning, that you're cared for. You have a new or renewed sense of role, mission, and service on the planet. For some people, this relationship with one or more divine intelligences ends up leading you to your life path or helping you improve what you're already doing or deepen it, enrich it. You find in your communications with these deities a source of guidance, support, and help on personal issues and the archetypal path that you're on. So what I mean by that is studying the stories of these deities can give you roadmaps as to how to live your life and what's going to happen next. And also an understanding that there is an end point and that it's not always going to be this way, that out of hell comes heaven once again. So, for example, this is why last year, or earlier in the year, I should say, I did a webinar called Transform Your Hell, using the Descent of Inanna and Gospel of Mary Magdalene to navigate life and death. And incidentally, that webinar is available now. Because encoded in that story of the goddess Inanna's descent into the underworld and her ascent back up is information on how we can make our descents better, and it gives us faith to have to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, so I won't go into that more now, but that just gives you an idea of what I mean by getting support for your archetypal path. You gain entry into the deeper roads of wisdom and mystery. And it may be that you're led to do particular types of initiations related to these deities that will definitely put you in contact with awe. You may also have a chance to do things better in this lifetime, make karmic restitution, or advance spiritually. Some of you have had these rounds of experiences with these deities before, and there's some cleanup that needs to happen, or you saw things go down, and now we're here in a different time, and you want to be here for the grand awakening and the grand reconstruction versus the deconstruction that you witnessed when you were a temple priest or priestess and the invaders were coming, etc. Okay? So, all right, on to the good stuff. I'm going to open the lines to all three of my guests. So Laura Shannon, Grail Corsini, and Robert Wagner. And so I'm unmuting you all, what I believe is unmuting you all. And Laura, let me know if you're there.
Can you hear me, Marguerite?
Yes, I can. Dear Laura Shannon, who's in Singhorn right now. And Laura, as some of you might have seen, is a sacred circle dance expert and pioneer. And she's been teaching this material on Eastern European dances for more than 30 years in more than 20 countries. And she is a real priestess who is connected with the mysteries. And so, Laura, I just wanted to invite you to speak for a few minutes about your own experience working with the deities, the gods and the goddesses. Anything you'd like to say, either evidence that you have personally that they're real, or something that occurred in your life that is enriching your life because of this type of connection, or some piece of wisdom that you have to share or advice around this. So I'll give the mic over to you.
Thank you, Marguerite, and thank you for having me, and welcome to all the listeners from all over the world. It's a privilege to be with you all tonight. I do agree completely, Marguerite, with the vision of the cosmic divine as both one in many and many in one. There was a Sufi master from the Western Sahara called Tierno Bokar, and he said all religions are branches of the same tree. Many mystics tell us that same message, and that's my feeling also, and also that the individual deities, the angels, the elementals, the saints, they're like little branches or twigs or fruits or leaves on those larger branches of that one tree. So the unity and the diversity are one for me. I feel it's like, I feel this overriding benevolent presence of the natural world, as many people do, as a oneness of divine love that's there for us. And then each individual tree or medicinal plant has its own set of characteristics, its attributes, which can heal us in specific ways. So like the plants, and you mentioned this also earlier, Marguerite, in your very inspiring first part of this talk, that, there are deities and plants that live more in certain locations, sacred sites or parts of the world. And one experience I wanted to share with you was when I was in my early 20s, so more than 25 years ago. The first time I went to Crete, and I was walking on a very deserted beach and had a vision, an extremely vivid experience of a woman in white with dark hair and very specific kinds of gold jewelry. And this made a deep impression on me. And later, I spoke about it with this old grandfather who had a jewelry shop near where I was staying. And I didn't really know how he would take this account of this very unusual, I thought, experience. But I hadn't even finished describing her to him when he interrupted me. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I know. And she had jewelry like this and this, right?" And he described these extremely specific things I had seen. And I was sitting there with my mouth open in his shop, and he said, "And I bet she gave you a gift, right? Was it like this?" And he described the gift she had given me. And he went on in the most, nonchalant kind of normal conversational tone. He said, "Oh, yeah, the first time I saw the lady in white," and he told me a very moving story from his youth more than 50 years before. And then later in the museum in Heraklion, as it was then, I saw this exact same jewelry. So that was one experience of like not knowing anything about it beforehand, having an encounter with an embodied presence of a localized deity who was known there both now and then. Another time, 10 years ago maybe, in the Sahara Desert with my Sufi meditation teacher and a small group of students, we were being guided on a retreat by the chief of this one Bedouin tribe, who was a man of great power. And on my first night in the desert, I had a dream, again, a very clear and vivid dream, where I was sitting around a campfire, and he was there, and there were a lot of other elders, grandmothers and grandfathers. And they gave me a message, and I woke the next morning full of this dream, and I wrote it down in my journal. And then when I went to breakfast, although we were all in silence, he signed that he would like to speak with me and that it was urgent. And so we spoke, and he said, "I saw you at the fire last night, and you were sitting there and I was sitting here." And I just looked at him and I said, "Yes." And he said, "The elders of this place have a message for you." And he told me the same message I had heard in my dream and had just finished writing in my journal. And these were not deities. These are the saints of those Saharan sacred places. They call them marabouts. They're wise men and women who lived, who died, but who are considered holy beings, still helping the men and women of our time. So that was another lived example. And I've been fortunate with my travels, Marguerite. I've got lots of stories like that. But what's interesting for me is also the research, as you know, I do with the dances. You mentioned Mount Olympus earlier. And the dances that I have researched in the villages that are high up on the sides of Mount Olympus. You know, Olympus is not just the place where the 12 Olympian deities of the Greek gods and goddesses reside. Before that, it was the birthplace of the muses. As you know, you write about this in your books. And the dance songs that are the favorite dance songs in the villages of the women, even today, you can go and hear them sing songs and do dances that are full of the images and the key attributes of the muses, say. So it's like still in that locality, there's a living danced memory, even though the temples are no longer there and they're all good Christians and they go to church and they wouldn't dream of confessing to still honoring the muses, but actually that is what they do. And the last thing I would just like to observe, Marguerite, because you talked about the time of the destruction of the temples, which I think many people remember from strong past life experiences. You know, when there was no longer a temple or a place for the men and women to dance and gather, they just took those dance circles out of the ruins of the temples, and wherever they made a circle, they made a sacred space to dance, which could be just as powerful a portal for the invocation of specific deities or specific benevolent powers as the temples themselves were. And I see this still in existence in the places I go, and this is a living link with that past time, because they didn't destroy, they didn't murder all the priests and priestesses, and the ones that survived encoded their wisdom and kept it alive in this other form. So we don't actually have to reinvent a connection, although there's so much we can do just by tuning in, as you say, with our altars and all the valuable advice you give. There is actually an open gateway that's been open the whole time.
I love that. Yeah.
Mm.
And thank you so much. And I had the privilege of being and helping to co-create those open portals with Laura in Findhorn a few weeks ago at the beginning of July. And you really could, and I think the women really could feel that, the power of that and the living, that the tradition was unbroken.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we miss you around here.
All right. Well, we'll see what we can conjure, right?
Right.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was really beautiful. Beautifully said and wonderful sharings. All right. Well, sorry to leave you, but I will now open the mic to Robert Wagner, who is the founder and director of Wild Sacredness, which enables people to re-enliven their connection with the sacred wildness on Vision Quest, and he also offers Tantra education and workshops and community rituals. So are you there, Robert?
Yes, I am, Marguerite.
Oh, good. Welcome. So similarly for you, in just a few minutes, how could you, what would you have to offer to this conversation?
Well, my approach, or I guess my personal experience of God, is not through any specific deity or personality. Rather, my
that's right. We talked about that. Yeah.
Yes. Rather, my experience is through a presence or silence, if you will. As far back as I can remember, there's always been this lively silence or presence or hum in the background of my awareness. And for me, this is the same silence I experience in deep meditation or prayer, or even in this present moment right now. I sense that awareness around me. So it's just a gentle shifting of my awareness. I hear it, I feel it, and I am that. And to me, this is what God is. It's just a lively presence that fills my awareness, fills my day, and of course I get real busy and focused on my daily activities, but there's this lovely, sweet essence that's always there when I just shift my attention. Just going back to this sense of conscious awareness, this sense of self that I've had pretty much all my life, from being a young boy to a man, and now pretty much considered an elder in some respect. This conscious part of myself is still with me. Even though the years pass and my body becomes older, I still have this sense of presence, this sense of silence that's unchanged or unaffected by the daily things that occur to me. So,
yeah,
this sense, this conscious part of myself, this is eternal. It's my sense of God that's always there, and specific activities like Vision Quest is one that really brings us to the forefront of my life. I've been facilitating Vision Quests for some time now. My first quest was over 18 years ago, and I found by stepping out into nature in a ceremonial way, it gives a profound opening, access point to really commune with myself, with my higher self, and just to be in the moment with what is. And it's a beautiful experience to peel back all the distractions and just be alone in the middle of the desert, for example, or up in the mountains. And to be held in a sacred ceremony and to have that opportunity to really get in touch with who I am as Robert and as a divine being, to really experience that in a very palatable way. So in essence, that sense of self, that sense of silence, permeates my day. Be it I'm taking a walk or meeting with a dear friend at a coffee shop or driving my car and listening to music. If I just make that little shift, I can sense that presence that's with me, and as if it's not something that's separate or outside of me. It is actually is me, or I should say, I am that silence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to invite all of us just to shift into that opening. Just to the best of your ability, do that little shift that Robert's talking about, where you can access the bigger picture of you, the well of the divine and love that is there and consciousness. That's wonderful, Robert, because it doesn't take long, and yet it's powerful. I could just feel myself shifting from like a little bit of anxiety that I was feeling about an issue that's starting to creep in, and then it was just like, oh, wow, yeah, I remember. This universe is amazing. I'm part of this greater consciousness that's actually supporting me. So Thank you. And I was just wondering if you could just talk one brief minute more about how this relates to your work with men. I know this is a huge topic, but also how men in particular are starting to access the divine in a non-dogmatic way, and how this is helping for this healing between the masculine and the feminine on the planet.
Yes. I facilitate men's groups. Specifically, I have a men's night at the Goddess Temple here in Ashland, Oregon. And we gather every Tuesday evening for a couple of hours. And it's a beautiful experience to sit with brothers and just create a sacred space and just openly share. A lot of the times we'll do specific themed evening, or we'll do deep work. And it allows men to honor each other, to hold space for each other, and to really support each other. Because as a man, there's a lot of challenges on how should I, as a man, show up. What is the best way for me to show up in my life? And to sit with other brothers and have those conversations. You know, how do I honor the feminine? How do I honor the masculine? How do I honor, the women in my life or the other brothers in my life? So to have those heart-to-heart, deep conversations allows men to move through any blockage or anything that's been holding them back from really being honest with themselves and with those dear in their lives. So,
beautiful.
Yeah.
Profound bow to you for this work.
Thank you. As well.
Just deep gratitude.
Deeply bow for you, my Marguerite, as well.
I'm so glad the Grail told me about you. Thank you so much for your offerings here. I hope you'll stay on for till the end with us.
Yes, I will.
Yes, so everybody check out wildsacredness.com and see what Robert's all about. Thank you. And we move now to Grail, who told me about you and your wonderful work, Robert. And Grail now is the founder and co-director of the Goddess Temple of Ashland, where Robert is doing that work in Oregon. And she's an international workshop leader, a ceremonial dancer, a priestess birth attendant, a clairvoyant guide, really a profound font of wisdom and experience related to the other realms. And I must say, has had a huge impact in my life, as has Laura. My experience with Grail was really to have quite an initiation back into Avalon when I was in Glastonbury back in 2011, for which I'm eternally grateful, Grail. Or maybe it was 2010. No, it was 2010 when I did the
It was 2010.
Yeah. So, Grail, welcome. And I open the floor to you to speak from the heart about your own connection with the divine, divinities, goddesses, gods, whatever you'd like to share in a few minutes here.
Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you deeply for this opportunity. And Laura and Robert, I really appreciate your sharing as well. And thank you, everyone out there, for carving out this time. That's so important to really look at this through the lens of our expanded connection as God-best family, the divine masculine, divine feminine, all in one. And I have to tell you, family, I am rushing. I have so much heat going on inside of me right now. I feel like I'm having the major surges that the portal, the gateway of my heart has been so opened with this conversation. And I could just, of course, we're all connected, and I have so many similarities to what Marguerite has shared and Laura and Robert. And for me, my first real connections with the supernatural, the other world, was directly through extraterrestrial experience after my first visit to Joshua Tree. And for me, this was something that was so shocking because it wasn't anything that I was, I want to be, visited by an ET. I wonder what it's like. I wasn't obsessed with books about it or movies about it or anything. It was just like, I went to a gathering at Joshua Tree. I was driving home, and while driving home at 3 o'clock in the morning under zero hallucinogens, I was met by a huge mothership in the middle of the freeway that I slammed on my brakes and went through. And that was my first experience of what it is like being the space between the cells. The tiny, tiny atoms, what makes up an atom, all of that, because I felt what it felt like to go through something. As if I could put my hand through a wall, I have direct, conscious connection now of what that feels like, because I went through that ship. And then, I could go on and on and on about that experience, but basically for the entire month of October that year, every single day I was visited, either in the dream time or in the waking time, with profound experiences. And so then I got a couple years of a rest, because let me tell you, an entire month of that every day, I needed integration time. So I had quite a few years of a rest from that. And then when I was in the process of creating my educational performance art theater, with the Flying Lotus, my first goddess temple in Mount Shasta, I was creating a show called Birth Unveiled. And Birth Unveiled was about specifically giving women an opportunity to share their birth stories, kind of like the vagina monologue on birth. And with that, I wanted to as well acknowledge the goddesses. And the goddesses that I knew about most then were from the sacred chants: Isis, Astarte, Diana, Hecate, Demeter, Kali, Inanna, and the ladies that we were working with wanted to add in Lakshmi. Let's throw in Lakshmi. So with the creation of that show, and also with wanting to evolve the myths that we've been told that, the mythological stories that felt like, I feel like something got twisted there. I feel like over the years and through the sharings of stories, there was a real twist. I remember it different. So we wanted to do that in our educational performance art theater as well. And so in my prayers for creating Birth Unveiled, I prayed, Goddess, please come to me in the dream time. Please assist me with how to create this show, because it was something pulsing through me, but it's something that I never had done before, And I come from a Hollywood background of performance, but certainly not doing educational performance art. And I also come from an Italian Catholic background, but not doing anything like this. But my communion with the goddess was increasing over the years, and I asked. And Isis came to me in the dream time very, very clearly. And it was just, she didn't look like the Egyptian Isis that we see in the movies or in the pictures and et cetera. She looked she revealed herself as I am Isis, and it was
wow.
like absolutely. And she shared with me the entire lineup of the show. I woke up, I wrote the whole thing, and done. And
another benefit to working with the gods.
Exactly.
They give you the transcript and the whole structure.
Done.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so great. And this was my relationship, this is my unyielding trust in the goddess began there. Unyielding trust. Unwavering trust. Absolute
Beautiful.
Purity of trust. And then moving from there, there I was. I met Isis while I was in Shasta, and then I met Bridget while I was on Crete, and I met Ganesh while I was in Ashland. So, I really appreciate what you said earlier, that you don't have to visit those places. You can meet these gods and go to these holy realms within the dream time, within journeying, shamanic journeying. Of course. My feelings were so deep and rich with these connections that I had to go to the British Isles, to Bridie's Isles, to Bridget's Isles, to deepen my connection, and of course meet you, which was a major part of our work of remembering.
Exactly.
But all of these connections, that have brought me to creating community around connection to the goddess, because I've raised 3 goddess temples, in doing this work, creating community.
It's incredible.
For the activation, for the memory. I mean, people step on to the wood chip path at the Jackson Well Springs in Ashland, and when you step on that wood chip path, you are on the goddess temple of Ashland sanctuary. And over and over and over again, people just stop and are just completely altered, because it is an absolute portal of memory.
You're setting up that energy. And I really want to encourage listeners, when you feel like you have these momentous connections with other people, I know many of you on the call have, pay attention, follow it, and honor it. Grail and I could have written off what happened in Glastonbury as, fanciful imagination. But it's like, no, I took it seriously. And I continue to take seriously what happened. And as you take these things seriously, they take you seriously. And, that path of trust deepens. And then you really do find things starting to shift in the phenomenological world. So Grail, you get people to go into immediate altered states, when they get on the property over there, or whatever it is. Laura in the dance circles, Robert in the vision quest, and so forth, because you're setting up these energies. So it is time for us to celebrate these connections and this community. Grail, thank you so much. And we're going to just go a little longer. I wish I could continue to talk to all 3 of you. We're going to go a little longer because I wanted to, first of all, invite listeners to, if you want, you can write some of your own experiences or sharings or questions on the Q&A field. And anybody else who would like to share, please, and you're online, you're on the phone line, please press *2. I for sure want to hear from Saniel Bonder and Joy. I think Joy is still here. Oh, maybe she had to scoot off. Anyway, Joy, if you are here and I'm missing you, press *2, but I don't think you are. Anyway, Saniel, I'm going to unmute you and invite you to speak. And once again, if anybody else wishes to share, please press *2 so that I can unmute you. But there we go. Saniel, you are unmuted. Do you want to? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you just give a brief bio sentence about yourself, and then maybe just a brief sharing that would be relevant to this gathering?
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it short. Thank you, Marguerite, and great appreciation to Laura, Robert, and Grail. Beautiful stories all. I'm a spiritual teacher, activator, convener, awakener. I've been doing my work for 20 plus years. I'm now in my mid-60s. I've been around many blocks, and these kinds of considerations are very central to my life. And just to get at something really specific here that this whole beautiful presentation has brought up for me, I've been in the realm of accepting that gods are real and these different kinds of intelligences all do indeed exist, and all the mysteries that you so beautifully clarified for us, Marguerite, for quite some time. My awakening took place, the primary one, in 1992. And I just want to acknowledge and kind of poking some fun at myself here, all that being the case, a couple of things that have occurred for me that took me, first of all, 40 years to figure out, and then the second one, 20 years to figure out, and the last 20 years in both cases, supposedly and truly quite awake in many ways, but still under the influence of that conditioning. And that was that when I was 21, I was inspired to write a play about Jesus and the apostles during a visit to a great Indian saint named Maharaji. And he blessed it very, very powerfully. And it opened up a current to some infinite reservoir of inspiration and light above. It took 40 years for me to figure out that at the other end of that current and pervading throughout is the living presence of Jesus. So I was related to it as an energetic event, but I didn't get that there was, so to speak, somebody there.
Yeah.
And similarly with Mary Magdalene in 1994, there was a transition that occurred in my whole process, a much deeper embodiment, and I had been exposed to the stories of how she, in fact, was able to help Jesus bring his Christ consciousness down all the way to the feet, to the earth. But it was only many years later that it became evident to me, and I think they were both kind of continuing to knock on my door, hello, that it dawned on me, oh, it's you. Hi there. Let's, I want to participate with you, and so I'm now doing that. But I just want to acknowledge that
beautiful.
The conditioning doesn't automatically go away, and we can be lighthearted about this because, frankly, those intelligences aren't beating us over the head about it either.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you, Saniel. And
you're very welcome.
You know, the thing is, it's like whenever I hear anyone say Jesus, you know, like, it's funny how even though I've been having all of these initiations into the Christ consciousness, and he's one of my masters that I work with, I cringe because it still has that fundamentalist energy. And we need to unhook, we need to take the hanger off Jesus with that fundamentalist energy because, you know, the connection with that consciousness, with that being, is so profound. So it's almost like, let's restore the mystical Christ. Let's restore the mystical Magdalene. Let's restore the mystical Mary. You know, and I feel like that's exactly the type of work you're doing. So thank you so much. And I know you're doing a webinar, too, called Christ, what is it called?
Christing 2.0.
Christing 2.0, and that's through the Shift Network. Through
the Shift Network. It's technically a telecourse, teleseminar course.
Yes. And so if I recommend people go onto the Shift, SHIFT, Shift Network website to find that Saniel, SANIEL, Bonder, BONDER. Okay, so yes, thank you so much. And I'm just going to again, we're just going to go a few more minutes. I invite anybody who wants to share to press star 2 who's on the phone. Meanwhile, I've got somebody, Alaya, another beautiful priestess, She's saying, thank you, Grail, for sharing your experience with extraterrestrials, because I've gone from communicating and working with gods and goddesses to discovering a lot about my connection to a specific entity that the gods, goddesses, angels, and etc. now have to go through in order to communicate with me. I at least feel a lot better with knowing I do not have to choose one or the other, but am now deepening my relationship to my source so that I can work better in the world and with deities when it is necessary. And thank you, Marguerite, for doing this call. And thank you, Alaya, for being on the planet and doing the work that we know you're doing. And we look forward to that. Let's see. I think that's it online. Let me just look to see if anybody raised their hand. Let's see. I've got one person. Oh, goody. I'll take this one call, and then we will conclude. So please just stay a couple more minutes, people. And, Saniel, I will mute you again. Okay. Entering Frederick Lerman of Nomad University. Can you hear me, Frederick?
Yes, I can.
Oh, thanks for being on the call. And what would you like to share? And maybe give us a little one-sentence bio of yourself as well.
Well, the one-sentence bio is that I am someone who is constantly learning and exploring, and I've explored in all directions. So I'm pretty hard to define even to myself.
And that's a good thing.
Yes. And thank you for your inspiration and clarity today, too. Very, very
You're
wonderful.
Welcome.
Two quick versions of what could be long stories. One of the great things you pointed out is that it's sometimes necessary to go to the underworld to come back to the light. And when I was around 35 years old, I was in Hawaii, and Hawaiian Islands are volcanic islands, and the major deity there, one of them, is Pele, who is the goddess of the volcano. Very active, very alive, very present in the experience of many contemporary Hawaiians. She's very real and very well known. And one of the things about Pele is that sometimes you can meet her on the road without recognizing her.
So
and
I've heard.
Sometimes she appears as a young woman, and sometimes she appears as an old woman. She has a bit of the trickster in her.
Yeah.
And when you, in the opening meditation, had us go down to that iron crystal, molten iron crystal, and wrap around it, that is Pele's territory down there, too.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that, because now I know I need to greet her every time you do that.
Yes. You want to be very polite to her if you think it might be Pele.
I always ask permission, all right?
Yeah. And so I was in Hawaii, and I had been thinking about lots of things for many years, and I had gotten myself out of a lot of the murk of my adolescence and childhood. But something happened one afternoon there on Maui where I was plunged back. I had a relapse into the depths of my adolescent depression. And it was very heavy, and it was not much fun. So I really just wanted to be alone, but I was hungry, and I wandered into a restaurant, and there were a group of friends, people that I knew, who waved me over to their table. I didn't really want to go, but I was stuck. They saw me. I sat down, and some of the people in the group of about 15 people, I didn't know. And sitting next to me was a young woman. I don't know how old she was, but she was extremely lively, sparkly, happy, everything I wasn't. And she had kind of frantically curly blonde hair. She looked sort of like a nature spirit. She took an interest in me and would not leave me alone with my misery. And after dinner, she insisted that I come with her out onto the jetty in Lahaina, where it was a kind of a windy night, and the waves were rolling in and crashing on this rock jetty about 100 yards out, away from the shore. And I really didn't want to go, but she wouldn't accept no. She sat me down and made me sit there facing the waves while the spray came up and got me quite soaked after about 10 minutes. After which I felt somewhat better, like I had taken a shower. And then walked back, and I asked her, who she was and where she was staying, and she gave me a name and a story, and seemed she wasn't staying anywhere. She was just wandering, traveling around. I said, well, I'm staying in a condo not too far away. If you want a place to stay, you can stay there tonight. The short version of the story is the next morning when I woke up, she was in the living room practicing yoga. And the thing that I couldn't compute was that this young girl, who could have been 17 to 28, anywhere in there, was now an old woman.
Oh, my God.
And she was still she was much more calm, but she still had this power. And she was doing her yoga, and she had very fine lines on her face, which I didn't see the night before. But she really was definitely a woman at least 60 and maybe much older. And so when I said, do you need a ride anywhere after breakfast? And she walked me down she said, no, just drop me at this intersection and I'll hitch a ride. And she had nothing with her except her clothes. And I said, well, where are you going? And she said, well, I'm just traveling around the island. I said, well, what are you here for? She said, I work for Pelé. That's what she said. And she pulled me all the way back out of this deep depression back up to a wonderful spot.
Oh my God, that is so
I know it sounds many of the stories you've heard sound completely impossible. This was one of them. And
Frederick, you're filled with these amazing, amazing stories. If anybody ever gets to meet Frederick Lerman in Washington State,
well,
it's worth your time.
We will meet.
Thank
one
you.
last thing
so
about
much.
Saniel's story. This is just a one-liner. I had a dream one night, a crystal clear dream that surprised me, where Jesus, Buddha, and Lao Tzu or someone else, there were three very high sages. They were sitting around, and I was simply observing, and they were teasing each other as young boys do. Huh. And so first they got on Buddha and they said, how come you're so fat? You know, if you're a god and so on and so forth, why are you so fat? Anyway, I don't remember all the answers, but when the two of them got on Jesus' case and said, what is this thing with this suffering and crucifixion? People are fascinated with that, and they just use it to justify all kinds of pain in their lives. You know, what is this deal with your hanging on the cross? And what is this thing about the Antichrist? What does that have to do with anything? And Jesus just said, he smiled and he said, oh, they got it wrong. It wasn't the Antichrist. They misunderstood. It's untie Christ. Get him off the cross. And I sat up and woke up in the middle of the morning. I said, that is fantastic.
That is fantastic. I hope that's going in your memoirs.
Oh, yes, one day.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, Frederick. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing. We're going to wrap up now. Thanks. And we could be on for so much longer, but I'm so privileged to have this time together. I'm just reminding everybody that for the next 15 minutes now live, you can sign up with the discount for the Gods We Trust webinar if you want to go down the road of these beautiful, powerful male gods, learning more about them, connecting with them more deeply. There's the pricing. You can use the Gods 40 code for the $40 discount in the shopping cart. And I hope that more of you will sign in for that. So let's just close our eyes, take a deep breath, exhale, and let's just do what Robert showed us how to do, just to shift back into that holistic, larger consciousness, which we know is the repository for all the gods and the one in the many in the one. And let us just express our appreciation, our gratitude. If you wish, put out a little pulse of request to deepen your connection with the ones who you are called by and whom are calling you. Taking another deep breath in, exhaling. All right, beloveds. Well, with that, we conclude our call on Are Gods Real, having concluded that they are real. So go forth with the real gods and goddesses today, and may your life be blessed. Bye for now.